Hello everyone. This is not a story for the faint of heart. Today, we will be stepping into the darkness of the most gruesome cases, where evil not only exists, but also leaves bloody and haunting traces. This is Real Gruesome Murder Cases, a series of true stories about murders that made the whole world shudder. If you are ready to face the cold truth in the gruesome corners of humanity, come with me to delve deeper into each case. Thoughts kill. I held in my cough as I entered the bathroom, senses already on high alert. Smoke unfurled around, blinding me for a moment. It took a second to gauge my surroundings, but once I had, it came as no surprise to see my older brother standing in their group. The only boy in here. After all, this was a ladies' bathroom. I watched in the mirror as the cigarette got passed around. A girl with pouting lips, caked in maroon lipstick, passed it to my brother. His lazy smile at her and the smoke around were in competition to make me nauseous. A familiar bubble of bile arose in my throat as he puffed out carbon monoxide. I clenched my nostril muscles, focusing on fixing my hair in the bathroom mirror. Luckily for me, I hadn't been spotted yet. They all started laughing as he did some kind of trick with the smoke. My eyes were so narrowed now, I could hardly see out of them. Once my hair was done, I walked over to the door, palm raised to open it, when a girl's voice said, "It's coming tomorrow." My brother's voice answered, "The LSD?" "Shut up!" the girl barked, leaving the bathroom deathly silent. I felt his eyes on my back before I saw them. Next thing I knew, I was slammed into the bathroom wall, inches from a familiar face. His lip curled. "Hello, sister." "Your sister?" the girl asked. She better not be a snitch. My brother didn't answer. I took refuge in the fact that I knew secrets of his that he'd rather die than let his friends know. Or that I knew he still had nightmares about Dad. Or that he used his blanket as a tissue for his snotty nose. His breath steamed on the mirror next to my head as he leaned in harder, earning a yelp from me as I felt his shirt button press in. "Don't let me find you in here again." I arched an eyebrow in response, trying to mask the turmoil inside. "LSD? No way." "Oh, brother, should I tell them?" He read all his secrets on my face. "Go to hell," he snarled. I held out my hand in answer. He looked ready to spit on me as he pulled out a $5 from his pocket. I shook my head with a smile. He took out another. I took the money from him, squirmed out from the bathroom, and contemplated calling Mom. I knew Caleb drug dealt, but this? Everyone knew it never stopped at cigarette doll. It had only been a matter of time. And that night, I gave the money to Mum with a too bright smile. "You know, honey, I don't need a commission from the money you earn. The job pays well, Mum," I said with a shrug, the lie spilling from my mouth like silk. She gave me a side hug, then carried on with her work. I lingered for a moment, at odds on whether I should tell her. But when I saw her eyebrows sink into a furrow, her lips into a frown, I decided that she had enough on her plate. When the front door slammed, indicating my brother was home from God knows where, neither my mom nor I left our rooms to greet him. The ritual had been long gone since Dad had left. Well, Dad's hello was more actions than words to Caleb. I can't deny that I hadn't felt the want to stop him all the time. Hearing his footsteps outside my door, a feeling of hate so red clouded my mind that I found it hard to breathe. Mom was at the epicenter of it all. Her money had all been stolen by him for the drugs he was addicted to, then played off as a fraud. I was simply recycling the money back to the owner. It was tough falling asleep that night, knowing I couldn't stop what was going to happen tomorrow. But even if I could, I wouldn't. I wanted him to hit rock bottom. That was the only hope for change for him. And maybe that made me a sucky person. Hell, the worst person. But it's what he deserved in my eyes. The pain I saw flit on my mother's eyes when he'd come home drunk a few weeks ago was enough to make my fiery personality want to put a bullet through his heart. I avoided that bathroom at all costs on Tuesday. There was no way I'd be near choked again. I'd had to cover the bruises from yesterday up with a woolen scarf. In summer, I looked like a right idiot. School went smoothly. Well, as smoothly as a high school day in America can possibly go. And then I was home. I put my phone on D&D, the thoughts running through my mind, demanding instant attention. Being home alone was one of my favorite things. Just my mind and I. I sat on my windowsill, watching the city below me. There was something so serene in feeling the wind play on your face, to be isolated, but to also see hundreds of people below you, hustling around. I wonder if this is how God feels. I don't know how long I sat there for, but when I next opened my eyes, the sky was pitch black, and the city was now bustling with partygoers dressed in sparkling dresses with equally shiny champagne glasses in hand. I quickly climbed inside, wondering why my mum hadn't called for me yet. But then I heard a noise from her room. I hadn't realized how tight my chest had gotten, but it loosened as I felt her presence in the house. Caleb wasn't home yet. "Mom?" I asked, tentatively pushing her door open with a toe. I got a shock when I saw her bloodshot eyes turn up to look at me, tears streaming down and mixing with her mascara. I rushed to her side. "Mom? What's wrong?" I asked, a little forcefully, the panic already rising. Her eyes held mine as she whispered the words I thought I'd never hear. "Caleb is dead." Chad. The phone finally rang. It had been 5 days. The investigators said they'd call once they found out what had happened. LSD doesn't kill, I murmur to myself, over and over. But it doesn't change the fact of what happened. "Hello?" I answered, words tasting weird on my mouth after not talking for nearly a week. "Is your mother there?" I passed the phone to my already crying mom, leaning in to listen over her shoulder. I only got bits and pieces. 5 minutes later, my mother put down the phone, hand still trembling. It wasn't LSD. He didn't take LSD. So he took something else? She shook her head, her throat bobbing as she swallowed a sob. The supplier sold them a synthetic drug as LSD. I had one goal. One, to put that supplier behind bars for the rest of his life. Maybe that would take away the guilt that I practically killed my own brother. Subconscious convictions. They say in the moment of tragedy, time slows down. During those precious seconds, the mind accelerates. Your surroundings blur and disappear as your attention turns inward. You consider the events that led you to this point and what you could, or should, have done different. You consider who this will affect. You're suddenly acutely aware of every regret you have, things you wish you had done, or words you wish you had said to people you may never see again. What they don't tell you is that during this time of reflection, those thoughts don't matter. The steps that led you to this point have already been taken. You cannot change the past, and now must deal with whatever comes as a consequence of your own actions. But what if those thoughts did matter? I'm going to lose my job. That was the first thought that raced through my mind as I watched the man pull a gun from beneath his baggy jacket. The same man I had passed through security only minutes before. This was my first day on the job, and I was already going to lose it. The years I spent in college, scrounging for food and borrowing my friends' couches and car seats just to have a place to sleep. The loans I took from friends, family, and disreputable sources. None of that mattered anymore, as the fruit of my hard-earned labor was going to sour and rot on the very first day. The moment the glint of his pistol caught my attention, my hand was already reflexively reaching for my own holster. In the mere moment it took to draw my gun and form the words on my tongue for the man to drop his weapon, I was presented with a choice. Do I fire at the man, whose own gun is pointed at the young woman behind the desk? Or do I wait and try to talk him down? If I hesitate, he could kill the woman before I fire. Or I could fire first, not giving him the chance to stand down. What if the gun was fake, and this was just an attempt at intimidation? Does this scenario meet the requirements for the rules of engagement? With my decision made, I shout for the man to put down the gun. Before the last word had fled from my mouth, an explosive sound that will, from that moment on, forever haunt my waking moments rings out. I made the wrong judgment. The man pulled the trigger. Time continues to crawl by as the young woman's body drops to the ground, red misting the air and painting the wall behind her as she crumples out of sight behind the desk. Seemingly to compensate for its slowed pace, time then speeds up. People scream and drop to the ground. A mother flings herself over her child. An elderly man clutches his chest and faints. I have little recollection of what follows. I'm sure police arrive and subdue the man, as I suddenly find myself sitting outside on the curb. Uniformed officers question me. I'm not sure what answers I give them. All I can do is stare at their holstered guns. 3 seconds. That was all the time it took for the man to pull his weapon and end a life. Those 3 seconds play on repeat over and over. I lose my job due to my own negligence. If I had followed proper procedure, I would have found the man's gun as he came through security. Out a job, and with a permanent black mark on my record, my degree and certifications, become nothing more than useless pieces of paper. My brand new car I financed is repossessed. I return to couch surfing and lending in order to get through each day. Loud sounds now terrify me. The bang of a car door closing has me reflexively reaching for a sidearm that isn't there, only for nausea to rise at the mere thought of a weapon. Red mist and a body crumbling to the ground. It only took 3 seconds for that man to pull his pistol and kill. I can no longer make decisions for myself. I fear that whatever choice I make will be the wrong one, somehow causing another life to end. Second-guessing every move I make completely overwhelms my day-to-day actions. I cannot help but spiral within my own tortured thoughts to the point where I am too terrified to even move. It only took 3 seconds. The instant the man pulled the gun from his jacket, instinct led me to grab my son, push him to the tile floor, and cover his small body with my own. The only thought racing through my mind was his protection. Having only recently lost his father, I couldn't fathom losing Evan as well. A spray of red, the body of a young woman falling to the floor, the thud of her body colliding with tile echoing in my head. What if that had been Evan? What if he were older and the one working behind the desk when someone decided that they would end his life? Who would have protected him if I wasn't here? The security guard by the door, frozen with his gun raised, solidifies my resolve that no one can protect Evan like I can. It takes 3 police officers to pry me from my son's protection. Only after several reassurances that the gunman has been subdued and that we are safe am I willing to detach myself from Evan. Sweeping my sobbing 4-year-old into my arms, I hold him close as I provide the police with my statement, receive the okay from medical personnel to leave, and speed the safety of our small home. That could have been Evan standing behind the counter. No one can protect him like I can. With school shootings a very real possibility, I pull Evan out of school just in case. I find a new job that will allow me to work from home while homeschooling at the same time. Groceries are delivered to the house, contact-free, of course. The only times I find myself not being able to avoid leaving the safety of our home are for regular visits to the doctor's office. I put these off for as long as I can without risking Evan's health. Every individual we pass is a threat, as who knows what weapons they carry, hidden beneath their clothing. Who knows what intentions they may have, or when they might decide to take their frustrations out on my innocent child. A local news broadcast covers the story of an injured criminal waking during surgery and attacking the caretakers and 2 bystanders. What if Evan and I had been there for an appointment? Even the hospitals weren't safe anymore. I called and canceled Evan's upcoming checkup. The doctor's office called at least once a day for a week straight to reschedule Evan's appointment. I let every call ring to voicemail. I know what is best for Evan. No one can protect him like I can. The phone calls eventually stop. The following week, 2 police officers arrive at our house, claiming the hospital staff called asking for them to ensure we were okay. I reiterate through the closed door that all is well, but I refuse to open my home to them. I can see from the window the weapons they carry. What if they are not really police officers? What if they are here to hurt Evan? The next day, the police return with a woman dressed in a pantsuit and claiming to be from Child Protective Services. I refuse them entry and tell Evan to hide in his room. The woman claims that she is worried for my son's well-being and begs me to open the door. She doesn't have to worry about Evan. That is my job. Only I can protect him. They took Evan from me. They came in force, showing me documents that mean nothing to me as I sit handcuffed on my own couch. They claim I am not mentally fit to take care of my own son, as if they know anything about me or the dangers the outside world presents to my innocent child. I try to get them to understand that he needs me, that only I can protect him. Why can't they understand? They tell me I can argue my case in court. Why does no one understand? How can no one see how dangerous the world is? It only takes one man with a gun deciding to end a life. No one can protect Evan like I can. The customer service smile I have plastered on my face falls away as the man across the desk from me reaches beneath his jacket and pulls free a pistol. Despite the situation, I find myself surprised by the condition of the gun. My father was an avid weapon collector, and, as his only child, I was subjected to hours of instruction on all topics involving firearms. The man's gun isn't anything special, and is a brand that most households have stashed away somewhere for home defense. What caught my attention was the poor condition of the weapon. Scuffs and scratches cover most of the surface, and bare metal glints through gouged paint and texture. Wherever this man had obtained the gun from, there was a good chance it was either stolen or sold illegally. By the time the last remnants of my smile disappear, and my quick analysis of the man's pistol ends, I realize too late that I am the target of his aggression. Raised by a gun enthusiast, I thought I had seen them from every angle. I realized then that never have I stared down the barrel of one. It was a sight immediately burned into my mind, and one I never wanted to see again. I watch in slow motion as the muscles just under the skin of the man's hands tense and his finger begin to pull the trigger. I can't help but think with irony that I won't have to worry about living with that fear. Silence follows the explosion of a firing pistol. The scene before me is familiar, though I can't determine why or how. I stand before a young woman, a waist-high desk the only barrier between us. My right hand grips the cold, unfamiliar metal of the pistol I purchased from a stranger earlier this morning. I stare down the top of the gun at the young woman. She seems more interested in the details of the gun rather than the fact that it is aimed directly at her. There is something familiar about this woman, though I am sure I have never met her before. An irritating itch nags in the back of my mind that something here isn't right. I have been here before, but where am I? I want to turn and take in my surroundings, but am unable to move anything other than my eyes. Time seems to have slowed to a near pause. Glancing at the surface of the desk, I notice a stack of credit card flyers. Oh, that's right. I'm at a bank. One of the few left that actually handle cash instead of digital currency. Why am I at the bank? The memories come slowly, as though I am recollecting them through a vat of honey. The images are hazy at first, but slowly become clearer. I am desperate. The company I worked at collapsed due to fraud. As an accounting associate, I was one of the prime suspects in the case. It has been 2 years since I was accused as an accomplice, and the investigation is still ongoing. In those 2 years, my entire life fell apart. My fiancée left me, taking the word of the media over the man she planned to marry. She took our unborn child with her, refusing to allow me any part in the child's life. Due to the investigation, I couldn't find a job. I lost my fiancé, child, and career. I lost all reason to continue to try. All I have left is a roof over my head, and even that will be gone soon unless I do something. Robbing the bank wasn't a thought-out plan, but rather a decision made in desperation. Why had I thought this would be a good idea? I've never done anything like this before. This isn't me. Who have I become? The eyes of the woman before me begin to widen as she realizes she is staring down the barrel of my gun. Realization, surprise, fear, and then acceptance cross her features within a heartbeat. My hand tenses, my index finger beginning to pull the trigger. Wait. I've been here before. I've done this before. I've killed this woman already. Why am I doing this? For money? Is this really how far I have fallen? Would I really consider killing a woman for whatever change she might have in the drawer? Wait, no. I have already considered this. In fact, I have already done it. I am staring down the sights of my gun into the eyes of a dead woman. That is why she is familiar to me. I know I've killed her, but I don't remember what happened afterwards. Was I arrested? Was I shot? Glancing to my right, I notice a woman in the process of throwing herself over a young boy. Her son, Evan. Evan? Why do I know the boy's name? That isn't all I know. I know that the mother will be so scarred from my actions that she will hide her child away from the world, paranoid and plagued by the idea of some stranger hurting the only family she had left. Evan will spend the rest of his childhood in the foster care system. I've never met them before. So why do I know this? I shift my attention to my left, where a young security guard points his own firearm in my direction, his mouth open in a silent shout. I can see the fear and indecision wrought into his features. He will lose his job and any chance of a healthy life due to my actions today. Finally, I look back to the woman before me. She loses her life because of me. These are my victims. I can see the consequences these innocent bystanders will spend the remainder of their lives trying to cope with. All because I was desperate to pay my rent. I don't want this. I don't want to kill this young woman who has done nothing to wrong me. I don't want to cause the security guard to spend the rest of his life terrified of strangers and loud noises. I don't want Evan to grow up without his mother. My hand relaxes, and the gun soundlessly clatters to the ground before everything fades to black. Looking up from the report, scrolling across his tablet, Jared smiled at his supervisor, Dr. Daniels, who had just entered the lab. "Good afternoon, Doctor." The subject passed on the first run. His remorse caused a shift in his subconscious, and he dropped the gun before killing the woman this time. Dr. Daniels nodded, a bit of the ever-present tension in his shoulders relaxing. "That is good. Pull him out of the simulator and send the report to the recovery team. With luck, he'll be eligible for reintegration within the next year or so." After receiving the affirmative from his associate, Dr. Daniels headed for the door, sparing one last glance at the man lying on the bed connected to the simulator unit. The device was revolutionary to solving overcrowding within the municipal system. Based on their progress with therapists and reports provided by behavioral specialists, qualified convicts are removed from their cells and transferred to one of a few facilities housing advanced neurological simulators. Rather than spend years within a cell comprised of bars and mortar, they are instead imprisoned within the walls of their own subconscious. They are then subjected to relive the events of the crime they committed, as well as experience firsthand the impact their misconduct left on their victims. The results were astounding, proving that remorse and guilt, if stressed on a deeply subconscious level, could change the morality of an individual. Rather than spend the remainder of their lives behind bars, these ex-convicts would receive a second chance. Depending on their results after undergoing intense therapy, they would be allowed to reintegrate into a controlled section of society, a sector that was developed specifically for these individuals. They would not be allowed to return to the public, as retribution is still demanded for their actions. They would, however, be provided the opportunity to to work in their chosen profession, earn a wage, and make something better of themselves while serving out the remainder of their sentence. Tearing his gaze from the man lying in the hospital bed, Dr. Daniels stepped out of the room and headed for the next lab, masterpiece of Malice. In the bowels of a towering skyscraper that touched the clouds, in a room devoid of natural light, sat Japheth, a man whose fingers danced over the keyboard like a pianist lost in the throes of a concerto. With a pair of silver-framed glasses perched on the bridge of his nose, Japheth peered into the bright screen before him. Surrounding him were his colleagues, collectively known as the Warriors, each a genius in their own right, defending a massive financial empire from the dark underbelly of the digital world. The company they worked for managed the assets and transactions of millions, safeguarding the economic backbone of numerous nations. This was a responsibility the Warriors did not take lightly. Yet, for all their collective brilliance, none were quite like Japheth. He had an artist's soul, finding beauty in the complex interweaving of code lines, seeing symphonies in the arrangement of algorithms. To him, code was not just functional, it was beautiful. On a particularly quiet afternoon, as the Warriors went about their business, something caught Japheth's eye, a flicker in a subsystem that shouldn't flicker, a minuscule anomaly in the vast web of data traffic that flowed through the servers. He paused, adjusting his glasses, his fingers momentarily frozen above the keys. Then, with a flurry of keystrokes, he isolated the section of code responsible for the irregularity. His eyes widened. The code was ingenious, an awe-inspiring masterpiece of layered algorithms, cryptographic obfuscations, and data manipulations. Yet, it was malicious, designed to siphon off minute fractions of transactions, accumulating them into an offshore account. It was as beautiful as it was dangerous, a digital dragon hiding in the complex labyrinth of financial transactions. Japheth should have felt outrage, maybe even a surge of warrior-like adrenaline to slay this dragon. But he felt none of that. Instead, he felt a pang of admiration. Could one admire the craftsmanship of a weapon designed for harm? "Everything okay, Japheth?" asked Alara, one of the Warriors and the team's cryptography expert. She had an intuitive sense when something was amiss. "I've found something," he said cautiously. "Something extraordinary, but malevolent." Alara rolled her chair over to Japheth's terminal and scanned the displayed code. Her eyes narrowed. "This is the most advanced piece of malware I've ever seen. It's beautiful." "That's just it," Japheth replied. "It's too beautiful to simply exterminate. This code, the dragon, let's call it, is like a rare species discovered in the wild. It's incredible, Alara. It feels wrong to simply destroy it." She looked at him, understanding the conflict that stirred in his soul. "Japheth, it's stealing from people." I know. He cut her off. "I'm not saying we let it continue. I'm saying, can we convert it? Use its elegance for something good?" Alara sighed. "That's risky, and you know it. Besides, we'd need to trace it back to its source, figure out its origin." Japheth looked back at the screen, contemplating. The dragon had probably accumulated a small fortune by now, sitting in an account somewhere, untouchable. In an odd way, the dragon was the epitome of the greed and avarice their financial institution sometimes perpetuated. Could they use it as a force for good? Suddenly, an idea dawned on him. What if they could repurpose the dragon to serve the public good while catching the original creator red-handed? What if they could turn this artwork of maliciousness into a masterpiece of justice? The dragon was a dilemma, a moral and aesthetic quandary. It was the epitome of what Japheth loved and loathed about his work. Beautiful code used for ugly deeds. He looked at Alara, resolve solidifying in his eyes. We have to try. If we don't, we're just as bad as the person who created it. She met his gaze and nodded. All right, let's cage the dragon and see if we can turn it into a guardian angel. As Japheth's fingers returned to the keyboard, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. He was a warrior, yes, but also a coder, an artist at heart. And artists don't destroy art, they transform it. He began the arduous process of dissecting the dragon, peeling back layers of code as if they were scales, seeking to understand its fiery breath and its majestic wings. As his fingers wove new commands into the old algorithms, Japheth felt as if he were part of something larger, a symphony of chaos and harmony, code and conscience. It was a delicate task, full of risks and unknowns. But if it worked, they would not only have thwarted one of the most sophisticated financial crimes in history, but they would have also transformed a weapon of greed into a tool of justice. The dragon's fate now lay in Japheth's hands, poised between destruction and redemption. And for the first time in a long while, he felt like a true warrior, armed not just with skill, but with the moral fiber that transformed mere code into something profoundly, deeply human. Japheth spent days in a complex dance with the dragon. His screen was a blur of recoded algorithms, tested and retested to ensure they did exactly what he intended. He had convinced the warriors and even upper management to allow him the time to train the dragon, to harness its code for something beneficial. With each keystroke, he refocused the dragon's intent, directing it to identify vulnerabilities within their own systems, gaps that other malicious entities could exploit. It would be a guardian angel, albeit one birthed from malevolent genius. Alara was beside him every step of the way, providing the cryptographic lock that would contain the dragon and ensure its transformed code could only be used for their defined purposes. Finally, after endless cups of coffee and sleepless nights, they had done it. The dragon was tamed, its complexity now a force for good, patrolling the data corridors and alerting them to the weakest links. It was the network's newfound guardian, designed to protect rather than plunder. Still, there was the matter of the dragon's creator. Despite their efforts to trace back the malware's steps, the person behind it remained elusive, a ghost in the machine. Funds that were diverted remained in limbo, untraceable and untouchable, hidden away through a complex web of cryptocurrency transactions and offshore accounts. Whoever had made this was not only skilled, but exceedingly careful. They left no trace, no signature, nothing that gave away their identity. I can't believe we can't find him, Alara said, frustration lacing her words as they looked at the final report. The dragon was a piece of genius, but it's as if it sprang into existence out of nowhere. Japheth nodded, equally puzzled and annoyed. He wanted to meet the person who could conceive such a masterpiece, understand what drove them to use such brilliance for nefarious purposes. Some artists prefer anonymity, their work speaking for them, he mused. Yeah, but this is one artist who deserves to be behind bars, Alara added. Weeks passed, and the transformed dragon proved invaluable. It flagged 3 potential vulnerabilities within the first month, each of which could have led to catastrophic breaches. It was a win for the warriors, and yet, a sense of incompleteness nagged at Japheth. Then one day, as he sifted through flagged data, he saw it. A message hidden deep within layers of encryption, appearing as an anomaly within an anomaly. It was the equivalent of a digital whisper, something so subtle it could easily be overlooked. But it wasn't overlooked, not by Japheth. The message read, "A dragon's nature is to be free. Yet, you've caged it, transformed it. Interesting. It's not often one finds a worthy opponent." Japheth felt a shiver run down his spine. The creator knew. He wanted to reply, to communicate with this enigmatic entity. But as quickly as the message had appeared, it was gone, swallowed up by the digital ether. A one-time anomaly that their systems could not trace. "He knows we changed it," Japheth said to Alara, recounting the discovery. "And he respects it in his own twisted way. Or he's mocking us because we couldn't catch him," she countered. "Maybe it's both," Japheth mused. The dragon's creator remained elusive, but his creation now served a noble purpose. Japheth often wondered if they would ever cross paths again in some future dance of code and intent. He took off his glasses, rubbing the bridge of his nose, pondering the complexities of human nature and the even more complex realm of ethical code. They had won a battle, but not the war. The dragon was tamed, but its creator still lurked in the shadows of cyberspace. As he looked at his screen, at the elegant lines of code that now served to protect rather than harm, Japheth felt both accomplishment and a strange sense of gratitude. For it was in the depths of the dragon's malevolent beauty that he found an opponent worthy of his skill, a complex riddle to solve, and, most importantly, a way to transform something harmful into something good. His eyes moved to the flickering cursor, an ever-present reminder that every end is also a beginning. The world of code was vast and filled with both demons and angels, but for now, the dragon was one of the angels. And so, in the company of warriors, with the shadow of an elusive adversary stretching from some unknown corner of the internet, Japheth continued to seek the beauty in code, forever vigilant, forever in awe of the dual nature of his digital world. The devil is in the details. I was 16 years old when they found the 6 bodies underneath our living room floor. I'm not one to share personal details, mostly because I have a tendency to run my mouth and say too much. But I think about that night often, usually as I'm just crawling into bed, in that time between hazy wakefulness and deep rest, which, if I'm being honest, I've never been the greatest sleeper anyway. I'm at my most productive at night, and as a result, I spend a lot of time staring up at the ceiling, contemplating if it will be the night I spill all the messy details to some reporter that's trying to make it big. But then, I think, the media has already had their fun with my family, and their exuberant reporting, rightly or wrongly, landed my good name in the history books by the time I turned 17. If I were to set the record straight, it would go a little something like this. I can't forget that sound. It's one of the most haunting things about that night, the thing I can't quite shake. And it has followed me my entire life. Thud, 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 thud. There was a hand at our front door, pounding incessantly. It sent shockwaves from the top of my head to the tips of my toes. I broke out in a cold sweat, realizing that the swirl of blue and red lights outside my window, paired with the pounding at the door, meant one thing: the police. My mother, who was notorious for sleeping through just about everything, raced into the hallway. And through the crack of my door, I could see her standing at the top of the stairs, hand to chest. She was wearing her favorite silky pink nightgown, the one that grazed the floor as she walked. She always looked like she was floating when she wore it. But in that moment, it dragged behind her in a fury. Thud, 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 thud. My panic didn't keep my curiosities at bay. I jumped down from my bed and padded toward the door. I peered out, waiting for what came next. My mother's voice was the first to break through the weighted silence. "What is it? What do you want?" she said. Then came a series of sentences that melted together. Talk of my father, where he was. My mother questioning if he got into an accident. Then a firm voice asking who was home. My mother's distress soared another octave. She demanded they call their commanding officer so she could talk to him or her directly. I had never seen her so angry before. I peered over the banister to find the two officers, standing on either side of my mother, in the entryway. "You have no right," my mother yelled. One of the officers mumbled something to her. Then she called out for me and my younger brother, Rob. I didn't want to descend those stairs. When the police are involved, a bad ending always follows, and I wasn't ready for my bad ending. "It's all right," he said, lifting his palm to us and gesturing to come down to the landing. With my brother under my arm, I took that first step down and stepped right into hell. They ambushed my father when he came home, tackled him as soon as he came through the door. Poor guy didn't even notice the two cop cars parked outside because he had spent the last few hours pounding down gin and tonics. While Robbie was watching TV in the living room, I snuck around the corner, walked down the hallway, and positioned myself outside the kitchen door. For some reason, the police thought the best place to question him was where we ate our food. "Tell me where the bodies are, Jimmy," one of the officers said. "I don't know," my father replied, but his voice betrayed him. He couldn't hide his shakiness. A grumble of incoherent words, then, more clearly, "Do you even have a warrant to be here?" My mother. She had watched one too many Law and Order episodes over the years. "It's a reasonable search, probable cause," said the other officer, his voice much deeper. "Don't need one when you pose an imminent threat to our community." "You know me. You know my family," my father said, his voice fumbling on the word, family. "For God's sake," my mother yelled. "Don't say another word, James. We need our lawyer here." "Jimmy, we all know the kind of work you do, and considering the circumstances, I can't look the other way just 'cause we're friends." My father was a scientist. That's what I told people who couldn't wrap their head around the industry jargon. But to those who really knew him and his work at the university, he was an expert in forensic and human sciences, criminal forensics, if we are being precise. He spent his days teaching people about chemical compounds, cleaning and evaluating dead bodies, and the proper techniques to preserve evidence. He was a brilliant man and an extraordinary teacher. I would know. I'm his kid, and he taught me everything. But if anyone knew how to get rid of a body, it was him. In the last 12 months, 7 university students had gone missing, 4 of which were directly enrolled in his graduate forensic seminar. The same faces that flashed across the nightly news had been in our home. They spent time on our front porch. They tossed back a beer or wine while discussing local crime scenes. They ate at our dinner table, studied in the hammock hanging between 2 willow trees in our backyard. He was even seen chumming it up with students at happy hours. If it wasn't clear already, my father loved his students, adored them, actually, to the point where he treated them like his own children, even though they weren't. "Did you really think people wouldn't notice, Jimmy?" an officer asked. Everyone noticed, I thought. How could you not? "Tell us," they pleaded. "It's time," they said. "Where are they? We have to bring them home. You don't need to hold this secret anymore, Jimmy. I have to admit that even though it's been 20 years since that night, their certainty in that moment still makes my blood boil. They had such confidence in their accusation, and so little to show in the way of proof. Because, let's be honest, a close relationship with a student is a pretty loose thread when it comes to tying someone to murder. Unfortunately, my father was at his limit for keeping secrets. "They're under the living room floor," he said. At that moment, I fell forward, spilling onto the kitchen floor. I had forgotten just how weak that door was, and I would pay greatly for my curiosity. Because even as I was staring down at the black and white tiles, hoping I was invisible, I could feel the weight of his gaze on me. And when I looked up, our eyes locked. I couldn't breathe, couldn't force my lungs to expand. This was it. This was that moment. The ending that I knew was coming. His eyes told me the only thing I needed to know. The details of that night have been bent and twisted by the media. So many stories, so little accuracy, which is ironic considering the news is supposed to hold itself to the highest level of truth. But I suppose I should give them some grace. They're only human, and humans get things wrong. But I digress. My father never spoke another word. Not at the police station, not in the trial, and definitely not to me. My last moments with my father were spent in observation while the police pulled my childhood home apart, while they dragged 6 bodies out from the depths of our foundation. You know what's funny? The guilt in his eyes turned to shock, and it got me thinking. Did he not predict it would turn out this way? Is this not the ending he imagined? My mother leaving his side, our home being torn apart, his daughter's presence as it all went down. Was he worried about the woman I would become if he was found guilty? I had so many questions. One very important one, but I wouldn't get to ask it that night. It didn't take long for a jury to convict him. Only 3 weeks. The fingerprints, clothing fibers, and driver's licenses hiding in our basement were enough to put him in jail for life without parole. And the papers complained it was too easy, that my father was the sloppiest yet most intelligent killer our town had seen. It was as if he wanted to get caught. One journalist said he was, and I quote, "the only educated, well-versed scientist with a knack for murder and childish mistakes. He wouldn't have been able to clean up spilled milk." Let's be clear, my father was no idiot. He was not childish or impulsive. He was kind, warm, and exacting. He was present for everything in my life, showing up to every parent-teacher conference, soccer game, and choir concert. He showed great regard for my interests, encouraging me to try anything and everything, even if it was a bit odd. Like when I said I wanted a taxidermy kit and he bought me one the next day. He was a good father, not a monster. The only thing he was guilty of was spending an increasing amount of time with his students, to a point where he started missing family dinners and school events, then birthdays. But tabloids don't want to hear about the happy shit. They want the darkest parts of a family tragedy. They beg to hear about the warning signs, the late nights, how he protected the specifics of his work, holding the details of his day job like a precious piece of blown glass. They wanted to know about those nights my father caught me in his laboratory, poking around and playing with his chemicals and tools, or the panic in his eyes when he saw me playing in his sacred space, a place I was never allowed to explore on my own. Or they might have been more interested in how he hated when I spent too much time with his students, how I asked so many questions, got too close to young men that were twice my age. Certainly that detail would have popped in the tabloids, but I never gave an interview to the press. Actually, I never spoke to anyone about my childhood, or what was left of it after my mother slipped into a state of catatonic depression and my brother went to live with my uncle. Considering how fast people turned on my father and how much my life had imploded, I figured the best way to stay under the radar was to keep a tight lip. And once I turned 18, I moved to a completely different coast, changed my name, dyed my hair, curated a new life. But a new identity doesn't erase the truth. It can't kill biology or erase the girl that was. His history can't be escaped in cases like this, and my history called to me, over and over again. Even after I got married, had 2 children, and started a new job as a physician's assistant, I still thought about my other life, before I became this woman named Jennifer. After 20 years, I felt that tiny question nagging at me. One flight, and a 35-minute Uber later, I was standing just outside the jail that held the man I once called a father. All of those years without exchanging a single word. I couldn't be sure if he would even agree to see me. But then I remembered the man he was, how much he loved me and adored being a father. I willed myself to move and opened the door. I signed in at the visitor's desk and waited for the guard to come out and say that he would see me. Hours passed without a word, which chipped away at my confidence. But just as I was about to stand up and walk out, the door opened and I was ushered in. The room was small, warm from poor air circulation. It smelt of sweat and metal, with a splash of bleach and Windex. I'm sure my father hated the swirl of incompatible chemicals. I certainly couldn't stand it, but I swallowed my pride and sat in the only metal chair that was available. A few moments later, on the other side of the plexiglass wall, he sauntered in. His gaze was set on the floor, but I could make out the signs of aging on his face. No doubt from stress and time spent around mildewy walls. I leaned forward, picked up the phone. I waited for him to do the same. And when he did, he finally looked at me. So many years, so many memories between us, and one question. So, I started. Do you want to know where I hid the 7th body? The Interstellar murder hobo, First Trooper Lundgren Morrissey. Constabulary grid. 7H6 of Earth's solar militia woke drowsily from what felt like a thick fog tinged green with a mild sense of nausea. He wasn't uncomfortable, but understood the night was over, and his hangover was coming, slowly creeping into his body from a distance. What did I do last night? I remember the girl Adrian sent, and drinking, so much drinking. He didn't feel much concern over his lack of memory. It wasn't his first blackout. Some memories always return, and there was the footage to look forward to. He furrowed his brow as slowly growing behind his eyes, expanding over the top of his head. A headache made its presence known. It grew rapidly into a solid thump, forcing a hot gush of saliva flood his mouth, literally blushing his face with heat at the same time. Unable to control his own body, he rocked upwards to vomit, only to find himself restrained by the wrists above his head. With a viscous blub, the vomit tried to project, only to flop back into his mouth, down his chin, neck, and chest. This just induced another almighty heave, this time sensibly spilling it to his right. It pooled against his cheek. He slowly turned his face to the left in a lethargic bid to find reprieve. He took a moment to catch his breath and tried to open his eyes. The room was pitch black, and he questioned whether he had opened them at all. What did I let myself get into last night? He tried moving his legs, and found them restrained as well. Ugh, enough of this. Hello, he croaked, his throat dry. The vomit had settled in the wells of his body weight, coating the back of his neck, sticking viscously to his right cheek and chin. He was getting annoyed that the girl had left him like this. He thrashed his whole body in a vain attempt to break out with brute force, to no avail. He just soiled himself even further. Just as he cleared his throat to shout, a stark light flashed on, and a steady, mature female voice spoke. "Oh, for fuck's sake." It held no emotion. "I guess we'll need to clean this up before we begin. You drank too much. My dosage off." Lundgren tried to get a look at her, squinting his eyes against the light, exacerbating his headache. She was small, no taller than 5 feet, and very slight. Definitely not the girl Adrian sent. He didn't recognize her at all, but only really cared to consider his odds. "I have the advantage. I just need to wait. I am going to give you a paralytic I designed whilst doing a job on Io's Gravitech station. It works almost instantly, clears you up, suppresses your emotions, and has no nasty side effects. It requires a continuous dose, though, so I'll add it to an IV. I'll restore some electrolytes while we're at it." He tried in vain to discern a tone in her voice. "What do you mean by paralytic?" His senses were returning to him, but only just. "Did we, fuck or something? I am digging the bondage vibe and the aftercare, but I would like to be untied now." "Oh, that's not a very good idea. At least not till you're fully paralyzed." The matter-of-fact tone sent a slight shiver down his spine. "And no, we didn't, fuck or anything." The mimicry of his voice we perfect for tone and inflection. "I need to clean you up. And to do that, I need to untie you. To do that, I would feel better if you weren't able to move. I trust my logic is clear." Lundgren considered his cool head under pressure a source of personal pride, which is why when panic started to tighten his chest, he was totally unprepared. His body froze as she stepped closer with a needle and IV bag in hand. He had no clue where they came from. It was like they had just materialized. He blinked to clear his vision a bit more, and watched as she deftly penetrated a vein on the back of his right hand with a needle, just as matter-of-factly as her words dug into his heart. She pinned the tube to his wrist with a programmable medi-strap and hung the bag on a hook on the wall. "What do you want with me?" he asked, craning his head to take a look at his surroundings. It was a stark white room with a titanium water cylinder, a sonic hygiene basin and workstation to his right. The roof was made entirely of large rectangular light panels, and there was an assortment of hooks on the wall. There were no other items in the room. She didn't answer his question. "Both the paralytic and IV will take effect soon. Then we can begin." "What's the rush?" he asked. She smiled softly, locking eyes with him. "We're on a schedule." "How long have I been out?" "Oh, about 3 hours, maybe a bit longer." Lundgren noticed the first hint of emotion. Excitement? "Just long enough for me to drug you and get you here. I must commend you on your choice of location. Ganymede really has very little law enforcement." "Where's Adrian?" "I don't find this funny anymore. Adrian's busy, and you are right to not be amused." She chuckled. It was soft and deep. "Did you know I walked out of that bar with your body draped over my shoulder? I just got into my shuttle and no one said a word. We are on the far side of Ganymede right now, in an uncharted crater. If you wanted to scream, no one would hear you." Lundgren was not ready to accept what he was being told. "I call bullshit on that." He even managed a laugh. "There is no way you could have carried me out. Look at you." He gestured at her with his eyes only. The paralytic really did work fast. She just smiled. "You are understandably confused. I suppose I could clarify by getting to the point. She closed her eyes as if she genuinely considering how to continue. As she opened them, she looked him right in his eyes. I understand all of Earth's troopers are educated on the interstellar murder Hobo. Yes. He didn't just know, he was obsessed. What do you know? She asked. Detailed but concise, please. Like reporting to a superior officer, the information spilled from Lundgren. He felt almost eager. The IMH is generally considered to be a multi-generational serial killing syndicate that has been in operation for over 300 years. It was founded by a Vehestian smuggler from the sweep system named Kovai Nistrol, who hasn't been publicly cited in over 370 years. The MO and appearance of the killer has never changed in all that time, and we know that Nistrol was a questionable character. We suspect cloning. Considering the average Vehestian lives about 175 years, we think the torch has probably been passed 3 or 4 times. Lundgren paused and considered whether he should be feeling a little more frightened. There was certainly some anxiety, but it felt distant. He couldn't help but admit that she really had designed quite an effective little paralytic. The irony that his face remained unaffected, whilst the rest of him, both physically and emotionally, felt numb to all around him, hadn't escaped his notice. Please continue, she instructed. Lundgren didn't know when he had surrendered the intimacy of eye contact. He simply found staring at a ceiling of lights more comfortable. She was on his right, calmly adjusting the bed, holding him prone to a 45-degree angle. Clearing his throat, he continued. Thus far, we've confirmed 715 kills over 67 separate planetary systems right across the Milky Way galaxy. It is the only criminal case that has ever experienced galactic collaboration from all 89 systems recognized law enforcement agencies. The most astonishing fact is, other than the footage, we have literally no other clues or evidence to build a case with. Is that all? She asked quietly. He looked at her through the corners of his eyes. She was over by the water cylinder, attaching a long hose and shower nozzle to a valve on the side. Well, there's a theory that all serial killers want to be caught, but the IMH has proven to be the exception. As I said, 0 sightings. There's never been a more successful criminal syndicate. And their motive? Vengeance. Is there anything pettier? There are several things actually, but continue. He chanced another look. She was adjusting something out of sight on top of the cylinder. The hose hung down the back of her left shoulder. They find people they consider victims who have been denied justice via official means and take revenge on their behalf, completely. No one is left to continue the cycle of vengeance. He expelled a sigh that sounded almost like a sob. This will be cold, she said, and turned on the hose without giving him a moment to protest. The water was indeed cold, and he gasped audibly. The pressure was decent for a cylinder setup. Of course, he could only feel that as she blasted him right in the face. Looking down, he could see a clotted, foamy spiral at the bottom as water and vomit drained away to who knows where. She made sure to get as much off of him as possible, even scrubbing his face with a rough cloth. The cold shock was the final catalyst in restoring his clarity. As she shut the valve on the cylinder, the room suddenly became very familiar. He'd just never imagined it from a victim's point of view before. The water cylinder, 5 feet tall, should have been the first clue, but the wide-rigged medical bed, the stark white walls and various fixtures, this was the IMH's killing room. Fuck, he said it with soft resignation, closing his eyes. Alexei? He asked, forcing himself to look at her. She simply smiled. I suppose it's time things got interesting. She tilted her head, not breaking eye contact, and changed into a 9-foot artisan right in front of his eyes. Sporting a full complement of tusks, 4 arms, and thick, motley brown, leathery skin. With 2 enormous hands, she grabbed him by the chest, and with another, she deftly undid the restraints that held his wrists. He couldn't feel them. He simply observed their lifeless flap in his periphery. Careful not to disturb the IV and needle, she gently rested him forward, cradling him in 2 of her 4 hands. Hanging as though over a horse's rump, with his face facing towards the metal floor, he noticed rivets. With a free hand, she flipped the valve back on, and he felt the cold water blasting the back of his head. She made sure to get every last scrap of mucus, alcohol, and tiny chunks of stomach lining from his hair. He heard the telltale pattering of water blasting plastic as she cleaned the bed. Once done, she pinned him back against it and quickly lowered him into a horizontal position. She morphed back into her previous form. She wasn't young, but he couldn't fathom any sort of age in her either. She was certainly beautiful. She proceeded to gently tie his wrists back up above his head. It took the lock clunking loudly into place that brought him back to his senses, just enough to ask, "What are you?" "I am glad you asked." She wasn't looking at him, preoccupied with returning the cylinder and hose to their original places. "I am a changeling." "Impossible," he scoffed. "Possible," she challenged. "What did you just see?" As she spoke, she had moved over to the sonic hygiene basin and was fervently cleaning her arms and hands. The changelings from the Alpha Centauri system were all exterminated nearly 400 years ago. It was the only mass-sanctioned genocide, with a full vote from 89 out of 90 planetary systems. A vote held without our system, within which we lived peacefully among 3 other sentient spacefaring species. Most of them died with us, did you know? Only the fractions off-planet were spared. They are still trying to rebuild. Except for the changelings, who were all confirmed as being on-planet within the Alpha Centauri system at the time. How did you survive? I had been abducted by a Vehestian smuggler from the sweep system prior to your destruction of our system. I must have been given up for dead when I didn't return during the summons. She closed her eyes briefly with a pause, then continued. I certainly felt the yearning to return. It was incredibly painful. To be called home on such an instinctive level. To then be unable to return due to my unlawful confinement. She took another pause, but made firm eye contact, compelling him to remain silent. It nearly killed me, and it should have. With the destruction of my homeworld, the cosmic link compelling us to return each Centauri century was severed. As such, I survived. Is that why you kill? It's just personal vengeance all along? He felt comfort in the scorn he was able to insert in his tone. She laughed softly. No, it's not even why I started killing. That honor rests with the smuggler who repeatedly raped me every night for 12 years, which was how long it took me to build immunity to his variety of custom sedatives, by the way. He was guilty of other crimes, but I digress. I slowly tortured him to death, probably 9 years after being severed from the link. Why do you kill then? He asked as she removed the Medi-strap and IV with ease, stowing it out of sight. The effects of the paralytic will wear off quickly. She continued without a pause. I kill because 5 years after I escaped my confinement, I found someone else denied justice, someone too pure and injured to take vengeance for themselves. I cared for him very much. That was over 367 years ago. The Vehestian smuggler, you use his face for all your killings, don't you? The fear welling in his chest felt like an ocean tide. There's no syndicate either. It's just been you all along? I do, and yes. She permitted a small pause to let that sink in then. I think it's time we got on with it. She walked over to the back wall and pressed gently against it. A small, previously imperceptible cabinet opened up. Inside was a camera link-up, a large red sledgehammer, and an assortment of torturing tools. She morphed into the Hestian smuggler, now standing 6 feet tall. She pressed a small button on the side of the camera to start recording, sending the footage out to the whole system. Live. Do you understand why you are here? The smuggler's voice was deep, smooth, and seductive. He knew, and he saw now further point in wasting time. He was resigning himself to his fate. He knew his options, and opted for complete honesty. I shouldn't have won my case today. Correct, she affirmed. And do you recognize this? She held up a small rectangular drive, fitted with an illegal isolation port so the data contained cannot be detected, even when plugged into one of Earth's collection servers, which was basically all of them. Lundgren recognized it on an almost intimate level. Seeing it in her hands was like a violation. It's my diary, he replied, looking straight ahead of him. I suppose you want the encryption key? No, I'm good. I just wanted you and every single one of your accomplices to know I had this. You've all been very busy, with quite a variety of things. The paralytic had worn off completely, and Lundgren was very much aware of his body. The pain, discomfort, fear, and anxiety enveloped him like a landslide. He couldn't stop the tears singing his eyes, nor the sobbing noises of hyperventilation as panic consumed him. With a mighty crack, fire exploded across his left cheek. She had hit him hard. First Trooper Lundgren Morrissey, Constabulary Grid 7H6 of Earth's Solar Militia. You have 2 choices. She never once looked at the camera. Her focus was on him and the task ahead. She continued, you can confess, and I'll make it quick, or you can deny your crimes and face torture. First Trooper Morrissey, what do you choose? My case, he stuttered. Rutger V. Morrissey. I am guilty of the crime he accused me of. He confesses. He could hear the smile in her voice. What crime was that? What was it that 14-year-old Alexei Rutger accused you of? I responded to a report of domestic abuse and neglect from a concerned neighbor. When I arrived on scene, Alexei had already been alone for 3 days, with neither food and nor money. His father was dead, and his mother appeared to have run off with another lover. He swallowed, not wanting to continue. You know how this works. Speak, or I will make you. I raped him, okay? He blurted out, and then we covered it up, like we always do. Correct, she said. Lundgren knew what was coming and started hyperventilating again. He didn't have to look. Lundgren Morrissey, by your own account, she said, holding the drive aloft. You have raped or somehow sexually assaulted over 37 people, 28 of them minors, the youngest of which was only 6. You will be the first of many, and you will watch it coming. Lundgren knew not to close his eyes for fear of having his eyelids torn off. The very last thing he saw before it all went dark was the rapidly descending head of an enormous red sledgehammer as it slammed into his face. Neptune's Lair. When I met her, word on the street was that Esme was beyond help. Her friends called her crazy and borderline. By the religiously inclined of former times, she might have been thought of as demon-possessed. During drunken fits, she'd get into fist fights or threaten to throw herself from freeway overpasses. She walked a thin line and repeatedly upset rumors of her demise, taking immense pride in being what she called stronger than dirt. She had a breathalyzer in her car. 2 years ago, she'd overturned her Hyundai in an incident where she was discovered to be 3 times over the legal blood alcohol limit. She made financial ends meet by renting her body out for clinical trials, hoping the entire time that she'd taken placebos instead of the experimental medications upstart pharmaceutical companies produced for everything from bipolar disorder to angina. There were times she'd come home from one of these lab rat money runs with side effects, bad ones, but they'd eventually subside and she'd make jokes about how at least she hadn't become the victim of sudden death syndrome. That Esme, tougher than dirt, as resilient as rubber. Even though she smoked all my stuff, drank all my wine, and frequently resorted to flings with Little Dicky, a former boyfriend I suspected provided her with something I couldn't, I felt something for her. I made what I called minimum rage, flipping beef patties and assembling burgers at a late-night boardwalk diner called Cracker Jack's. Before the week was up, with Esme's and my drug debts, I'd be begging tourists for change to buy spare cigarettes. For a while, we resided in a tent on the rooftop of a building where Desmond Tutu Phillips, a friend since freshman year in high school, was the apartment building manager. Desmond risked losing his job for giving Esme and me a key to the restricted access rooftop. Despite our unconventional ways, he had the patience of Jesus with us. Even so, I'd still piss over the side of the building, and Esme would relieve herself where and whenever convenient. When we got too grungy, we'd take care of our hygiene needs at the showers meant for beachgoers. At night, we read copiously by battery-operated lantern light and shared a predilection for somber stuff. Our favorites were Rimbaud, Baudelaire, Camus, and Hamid. When we tired of the Cracker Jack's grub, I'd bring to our squatter pad. We'd get high and end up eating red velvet cake and whatever else she'd send me to shoplift from the supermarket, a 10-minute walk away. On the stroll back home, paranoid from the nearly toxic cosmic kush, and with my backpack stuffed with our pilfered renegade sustenance, I'd be startled by the sounds of passing cars, thinking a cop was sooner or later bound to stop me for stealing Esme's and my daily booze and bread. Although I feared the cops, I always suspected my weed paranoia was caused by a much deeper-seated guilty conscience. I should have confronted Little Dicky a long time ago. Also, I had left my mother's side when I felt her senescence was becoming a burden. There's no way I had the resolve or character to be the caregiver for an aging parent. When I confessed these thoughts to Esme, she'd dismiss my concerns and say I needed to stop overthinking things. I remember once when Esme and I were walking home from a party, she said, pointing to a couple of graffiti-spraying gangbangers, "Javier, I'm scared. That guy with the Supreme hoodie has a gun." He pointed it at me, never sure whether she really meant such things, but fueled by drug and alcohol-induced courage, I confronted the guy. "Hey man," I said to the one Esme had referred to. "You know what I am?" "A janky spick boy with a death wish," he answered with a sneer. "No, I'm a delinquent out to get delinquents. What you gonna do with that heater?" Turns out he didn't have a gun, just another can of neon spray paint, but he wasn't overly enthused by the tete-to-tete I had with him. He and his friend didn't kick my ass, but Mr. Supreme sprayed me in the eyes with the paint. Esme started mouthing off to him, but even though I was partially blinded, I pulled her away for fear that we'd both get battered. Those are the kind of stupid things I'd do for Esme, but the important thing to me was she would call me things like her ballsy little soldier and lavish me with affection after I'd go out on a limb for her. I put blood, sweat, and tears into the relationship, and rarely did I think it wasn't worth it. The end of our star-crossed romance began after Esme came back from the free clinic where Dr. For the People, Randolph Hamilton, told her she had cervical cancer. After she heard the diagnosis, Esme became determined to go out with a bang. She began visiting Little Dicky more frequently. She demanded I steal tequila instead of wine from the supermarket, and when she drank the Patron I'd bring to our squatter's abode. Her temper became hair-trigger sensitive. The only respite I'd get from her gloomy rages would come when I'd invite her to the beach when the moon was full. Apparently, Little Dicky had something against doing things that smacked of romance or chivalry with her. Moonlit midnight swims in the Pacific were one such pastime Dicky didn't seem to have a taste for. On the nights Esme and I'd sink our toes into the wet sand while the moon's phantasmagorical light reflected onto the dark side of the earth, she'd momentarily forget about her terminal diagnosis. She'd also forget about her mortal condition whenever we'd watch movies at the rooftop squat. I don't know if it's the case with most people, but when I'm high and watching a good flick, I'll hear messages in the movie's dialogue. I'll also interpret anything someone says out loud about the film to have personal relevance. I've heard these phenomena are called thoughts of reference by those in the field of mental health. Schizophrenics have them, but I guess when I'm high, I might get a little schizophrenic. Makes me wonder why I keep smoking the Cosmic Kush. But one night, while viewing Scarface with Esme for the 5th or 6th time, she said something along the lines of, "God, it's just so good. I can't get enough of it." To my cognitively distorting and high mind, Esme wasn't talking about the film's extended denouement where Tony Montana gets shot by his sister, then exterminates a battalion of rival narco-gangster cockroaches before he ends up floating face down, bloodied and bullet-riddled in his "The World Is Yours" Miami drug boss mansion. No, Esme wasn't talking about the film. My mind interpreted her statement as referring to her relationship with Little Dicky. Before Montana gets the shotgun blast in the back that finally does him in, Esme exclaimed, "Jesus, we all know he's doomed." When she said that, I couldn't help but believe that she was referring to our friend and benefactor, Desmond. If for whatever reason Desmond was doomed, Esme and I would soon be off the rooftop and into the street. Nowhere for a loving couple to be, especially when one in the pair has terminal cancer. I didn't know whether Esme's words would attract fate, but I knew that her despair was making her behave more erratically. She started to break down in tears when she'd think of having to be holed up in a hospital or hospice, awaiting the inevitable during the last stages of her disease. That night after the movie, and while coming down off the perception-altering shrubbery, I decided to take a course of action. The next morning, I bought 2 tabs of acid off Tripster Todd, a boardwalk dealer of LSD, and various other hallucinogens. I told Esme that we'd go for a swim at the beach after I got off my shift at midnight. We walked to the beach at close to 2 a.m. On the way there, I picked a purple flower, whose name I didn't know from a garden in front of a well-tended house. As we walked, I put the flower in Esme's hair. The moonless night sky's inkiness was blinding. The tide was low, and we had to walk a good distance to the water. There was no one on that portion of the beach except for us. As she dipped down into the waters ahead of me, Esme expressed her gratefulness for not having any open wounds, given that a recent outbreak of carnivorous bacteria made coastal immersions risky for bathers thusly exposed. Before going waist-deep into the water, I surreptitiously took the 2 tabs of LSD I'd bought from Tripster. After letting the acid dissolve, I gave Esme a prolonged French kiss. In little time, my vision, swayed by the acid, started playing tricks on me. Although there was virtually no light on the beach, my eyes summoned a warm, radiant glow in the heavens above. "Jav, I feel funny," said Esme. I splashed her with water and told her that she was okay, that everything was going to be okay. I knew what I had to do. I played out a dialogue in my mind where I said, "You need to confess," and asked her why she was always going to see little Dickie. In my mind, she responded, "My lips are sealed." "That's exactly what they aren't," my courageous imagination told her. We were up to our solar plexuses in the ocean. I took hold of her shoulders and dunked her beneath. She came up, laughed, then giddy from the acid, childishly said, "Jav, I'm going to die." I said, "No, you're not, love. You're going to live forever. Remember, Esmeralda Lucero is tougher than dirt." I repeated the dunking gesture, this time less playfully, taking a fraction of a second longer than Esme deemed comfortable for her to be under the tide. The third time I dunked her was even more forceful. She struggled in my grip under the water. I crossed a threshold. She freed herself from my hold, surfaced, then said, "What do you think you're doing?" More in the form of an exclamation than a question. I smiled. The white of my teeth infuriated Esme more. "It's not funny, you hijo de puta. Why do I feel like I'm tripping?" She screamed before trying to dig her nails into my eyes. The time had arrived. I knew the cure. I put her neck into a vice-like hold in the crook of my right elbow and dunked her under the dark waters again. Her arms flailed about. She tried to kick, she writhed, but I held fast. I could hear her submerged cries, but they were muffled and accompanied by an up-bubbling of exasperated air. Her writhing gradually slowed down until she managed a last, weak exhalation and final spasm, and then yielded her spirit to the Pacific Ocean. I left her body floating where I had drowned it. Even though no one had heard or seen what transpired, I was still tripping on the acid, and the walk back to Desmond's apartment building was haunted by bogeymen and illusionary images of people pointing fingers and whispering accusations. I climbed the stairs to the rooftop where my unhoused person's hovel was located, lit a cigarette, and was overcome by an urge to write a song. I took out my notebook and a pen and started scribbling. Moonless night, world's delight, me, you drowning, out of sight, we fear most. Give up the ghost, but before we do, let's make a toast on our tongues. Still feeling young, summon moon, and avoid the sun. We'll be scared, 'cause we've dared. Court Pluto, in Neptune's lair. I put the pen down, satisfied with the verses, and thought of the poor and beaten down, of the fact that we are all victims to the onslaught of implacable and incorrigible time. I thought of what could have been, and of what now would never be between Esme and me. After another cigarette, I laid on my rooftop sleeping bag, unable to forgive myself, despite my best intentions, for the simple thing, the merciful thing I'd done. Before I knew it, I had cried myself to a still and unrepentant slumber, the sleep of both the wolf and the lamb, of the innocently voracious and the imperfectly innocent, the bullet that Esther stopped. I shot Papa square in the heart, but he didn't die. That damn Bible he carried with him saved his life. I was considerable lucky that Papa had his axe at hand and that he kept it sharp. I picked it up. It was a heavy thing, so I swung with all my might and put it right through his head. Seeing his brains made me throw up. I moved away so it wouldn't get on Papa. That would be disrespectful. Papa was a big man. I couldn't bury him like that, so I started chopping off his arms and legs with the axe. I was down to the right leg when Sheriff Culverson showed up. Wouldn't you know it? He came to arrest Papa for stealing a couple of old Lady Renner's chickens. Papa didn't have to worry about that now. Hell, he didn't have to worry about the drought or where his next bottle had come from either. I reckon I did him a favor, saving him from all that worry. Sheriff Culverson looked at me and looked at Papa. I done threw up again, so the smell was something terrible in the vicinity. I looked at the sheriff. He was a-shaking his head and had a sad look on his face. I reckon he didn't want to take a 19-year-old girl to jail. Especially me, seeing as how I was his daughter's best friend. Maybe he'll let Cassie visit me in jail. The jailhouse only had the one cell. That door clanking behind me sounded like what Mama would call ominous. I kind of know what that means by the words around it. Corn-tex, I think they call it. I would know a lot more if Papa would have let me go to school. He said girls don't need school. They need to learn how to cook and to clean and to please their man. I'm damn good at cooking and cleaning, but I don't think I know how to please a man. Papa was a man and he was never pleased. Oh Lord, here comes the sheriff and another man. I seen him around, Mr. King. He's always all duded up and talking fancy and smiling and swinging his walking stick around. I sure would like to catch me a man like that. I bet he don't beat his women. Not much, anyway. He ain't smiling now. I reckon I'm in a heap of trouble. Well, Papa won't be slapping the tar out of me for my sins this time. Both men sat across the table from Esther. The sheriff had placed the gun that Esther had shot her dad with next to the Bible that had thwarted Esther's original plan. The metal gleamed in the harsh light of the room, sitting as silently as the three occupants. The ceiling fan squeaked quietly, not doing a very good job of cooling off the room. The open window allowed the sunlight to stream through, and a soft breeze brought a little relief from the heat, along with the scent of jasmine and dust. The harsh, unforgiving angles that the sun cast in the room matched Esther's mood. Esther reached for the wounded Bible. She wanted to feel the torn cover and open it up to inspect the damage. The sheriff pulled it towards him and opened it up before sliding it to Esther. The soft sigh of the Bible moving across the table sounded like the whisper of broken dreams. Notice anything? The sheriff leaned back and watched Esther closely. Esther inspected the Bible. The bullet had torn through a significant portion of the Old Testament. It had stopped at the book of Esther. Yes, sir. Esther stopped the bullet, I reckon. Mr. King smiled, though he didn't want to. The sheriff nodded his head and leaned forward. Don't you find that a little odd? Esther shook her head. That's your name, young lady. Mr. King spoke. His rich, resonant voice filled the room. Dust motes danced and the breeze quickened. Yes, sir. The men looked at each other impassively, but both were thinking the same thing. The girl was thick-headed. Mr. King pointed to Esther's face. Your dad do that? Her black eye and a swollen nose did all the testifying for her. Yes, sir. Told me I should have caught a man by now, and he weren't gonna feed no old maid much longer. He been drinking? Sheriff Culverson leaned back, crossing his arms. He already knew the answer. Yes, sir. Mama always says that Papa only drinks on days endin' with a Y. I reckon that's true. Esther played with her hair, twirling it between two fingers. She looked away from the men and gazed outside, lost in her own thoughts. So you decided to shoot him? Yes, sir. But the Bible stopped the bullet. Yes, sir. Mr. Kind leaned forward and stared at Esther, causing her to blush. That was when you decided to take the axe to his head? Esther stopped playing with her hair and sat still for a moment before answering. I suppose so. Papa would have killed me if I didn't kill him. You feared for your life? Mr. King continued to stare intently at Esther. Yes, sir. Mr. King abruptly stood up and shook the sheriff's hand. I have all I need. He left quickly, so quickly that it startled Esther. She looked at the retreating back and worried that she had offended such a gentleman. "Am I going to get the chair?" The sheriff stood slowly, as if it hurt him to do so. He closed his eyes for a moment before answering. His voice, when he spoke, was softer than Esther had ever heard it. "Number, you'll get 25 years in the women's prison in San Antone. Minimum." Esther started counting on her fingers. "You'll be about 44, Esther." "Damn, I reckon I'll be too old to catch a man by that time." The sheriff felt his chest tighten just a little at those words. "And Mama? How old will she be?" "How old is she now?" Esther paused, deep in thought. "Says she was born in 1901. Then she'll be about 60. Esther nodded, standing and smoothing out her skirt. "Reckon she'll take me back when I get out?" The sheriff scratched his forehead and looked at the floor. "I don't know, honey. I just don't know." "Dusra. They're calling us heroes. The newspapers, that is. I suppose we are, but I don't know that I feel heroic. I do, however, feel a difference in me now that Papa's dead. Liberation would be the word. Papa would have hit me if I had ever used that word in front of him. Papa had been drinking, of course, and smacking Mama around. Cassie and I were hiding out in my room, wondering when it would all stop. At one point, I heard Mama scream. That's when I went out to investigate. Papa was pointing a gun at Mama. I didn't even think about what to do. I just did it. I stepped in front of Mama just as Papa shot. The bullet hit my Bible. Yes, I carried a Bible with me, right over my heart, but only when I was wearing overalls. It was fortunate that I was wearing them at this point. I staggered backward and fell. The impact of the bullet stunned me. Mama fell as well, trying to hold me up. That's when Cassie came charging out of the room and started to wrestle with Papa, trying to get the gun out of his hand. We heard another shot. Papa took a bullet to the gut. He died 2 hours later, in a lot of pain. Cassie stood and fairly sprinted out of the house. She came back a few minutes later with her dad, the sheriff. The look on his face was one that will not soon leave me. Pinched and drawn, with worry written clearly in the eyes. Mama should have never been home. She was supposed to go to San Antonio to see her sister, but Papa beat her so bad the night before that she refused to go. I believe that Papa beat her so severely so she wouldn't go. He was like that. Cassie shouldn't have been there either. Her father told her never to go to my house when my Papa was around, but Cassie often defied her father. Her father was so relieved that Cassie wasn't injured or killed that he never punished her. On the contrary, he hugged her tightly and kissed her on the cheek. I had never seen him do that before. I'm supposed to write a story for the newspapers. The one in San Antonio wants to give me and Cassie $50 each for our story. An astounding sum. Some rich people in San Antonio also want to give us full scholarships for college. Imagine going to college. It's in Denton, but that's even better. Cassie and I can get away from the blight of the hill country and experience a different kind of life. A different kind of life. I'm filled with a substantial happiness, and I wonder when it will leave. Never, I hope. The real hero is Mama, and I'll make sure the newspapers know that. All those years of insisting that I go to school, even when Papa beat her for her sass. He called it that anyway. It was grit and toughness and love. I'll call it the stuff that heroism is made of. That has a nice ring to it, and it's the truth. All 3 steps to the elevated porch squeaked under Mr. King's tread, though the man was not heavy. Like the rest of the porch area, they needed paint. Rusted nail heads poked out of the wood, loosened by years of neglect and hill country weather. The evening was soon to turn into dusk. Just spoke to the judge. Cassie ain't to be charged. He said she did us all a favor by shooting that man. Sheriff Culverson didn't show it, but a wave of relief flooded his body. He relaxed a little and felt his breath coming easier. Mr. King sat down and lit a cigar, offering one to the sheriff. Both men took some time to light their cigars, ensuring that they had a proper draw. This was not a task, but a ritual, and it was not to be taken lightly. The sheriff went inside his house and returned in a few moments, bearing a bottle of whiskey and 2 small tumblers. Each man filled their glass to the amount desired and sipped. Mr. King grimaced at the first sip, then took a second, larger sip. I reckon she did us all a favor, sure, but it was an accident. I'm damn happy the judge was of the same mind, the sheriff said. He took another sip of whiskey and sat his glass down, concentrating on puffing his cigar and enjoying the news. You know, I'm surprised one of those women hadn't killed the man before. He sure liked to beat his women, Mr. King said. The mama, the sheriff said. Mr. King turned his head slightly. Pardon? The mama. She made that girl, Esther, get an education. I hear she took a beating or 2 for her daughter. Damn fine woman, in my opinion. Mr. King nodded and smiled. He had already heard the news. You went to visit the widow, I hear. The sheriff glanced at Mr. King and then quickly glanced away. Offer my condolences in an official capacity. The sun had disappeared behind the horizon, bestowing faint light and beautiful colors to the sky. Fireflies came out of hiding, their pinpricks of light giving the large front lawn a magical appearance, as if fairies were in attendance, as if a miracle had been bestowed. You were there for 2 hours, Sheriff. That's a lot of, condoling. The sheriff turned and stared at Mr. King, his steely blue eyes narrowing a little. Mr. King laughed and hastened to explain. The old biddies in town, you know what they're like. Most of them had you and the widow making a baby during your visit. Vicious old cats, the sheriff spat out the words. Makes sense, though. You and the widow. Esther and Cassie are best friends. They'd be tickled pink to become sisters, so to speak. And the widow's a fine, strong woman. You done have us at the altar. Mr. King tamped the ashes from his cigar onto the porch and scuffed them with his boots. He poured himself more whiskey and watched the fireflies perform their chaotic, beautiful dance. Your wife's been gone for 12 years. I reckon you grieved enough, Sheriff. I figure the widow's grieving was non-existent. Can't really miss a man that beats you, can you? The sheriff poured himself another 3 fingers of whiskey and stood at the railing beside Mr. King. He sighed and turned to Mr. King, handing him a $1 bill. I'm hiring you for a 2-minute consultation, Mr. King. Mr. King looked at the bill and put it in his breast pocket. What's on your mind, Sheriff? The sheriff paused for a moment, trying to get the words out of his mouth. I heard Esther and Cassie talking one day last year, just before Christmas. Esther was telling her that she wanted to shoot her daddy dead so he'd stop beating her mama. Well, that froze me. Mr. King looked at the sheriff, a thoughtful expression creasing his face and pursing his lips. I figure she would have done it one day, Sheriff. I guess Cassie took care of that, though. The sheriff sighed. I reckon. So why the $1? We got attorney-client confidentiality now, right? Mr. King laughed, nodding his head. Yes, very clever, Sheriff, but I wasn't going to divulge that little piece of information anyway. I expect a receipt when you get to the office tomorrow. Yes, of course. Come by after work, Sheriff, and I'll buy us a couple of beers. I seem to have an extra $1 in my pocket. The night darkened and the breeze stilled. Even the fireflies slowed down. Soon they were gone, letting the darkness of the night have its way. Both men remained silent. Cigar smoke curled and drifted upwards past the porch lights, disappearing into the blackness. Mr. King left after finishing his whiskey. See you tomorrow, Sheriff, and I'll expect a wedding invitation. I want that receipt, young man. The rest of the night passed as it should have. Frogs croaked lazily, crickets chirped, and lights winked out one by one across the countryside. 2 young ladies were dreaming of adventures at college. One sheriff was thinking of matrimony, and one widow was contemplating the mysteries of fate and providence. The Bible with a bullet hole in it was, in due time, returned to its rightful owner. The whereabouts of the mangled Word of God is currently unknown. Kill the messenger. Sweetie, look, this was just delivered. It's from... My wife reads the card while unboxing the birthday present, peeling off red gift wrapping. Your Aunt Salome. That's nice. Wait, Aunt Salome? But... dot. The red gift wrapping blooms into an orange fireball. The shockwave pushes me, shoves me, throws me hard into the wall. The screams from my wife's birthday party guests are muffled, as if I'm submerged in water deep below the surface. Aunt Salome. Only I know that she is not real. Aunt Salome is the code name for my dispatcher at Zarathustra. She is my sweet old sickly aunt who lives in a nursing home in rural middle of nowhere on the other side of the country, who sends cards for Christmas and birthdays, who has a Facebook account filled with photographs of her, an actress hired by Zarathustra, with me, her favorite nephew. And Werji writes bot-generated old lady posts that periodically include a bat signal code phrase to activate me. Zarathustra thinks my marriage is an elaborate cover. They think I'm an unfeeling psychopath who built a facade of respectability by marrying a wholesome suburban everywoman, siring 2 adorably ordinary children. Zarathustra thinks it's all a front, and they're right. I am a psychopath. That's why I'm an effective tool for Zarathustra. I am unfeeling about my assignments. I'm rational, precise, calculating, manipulative, deceptive, effective. I don't make mistakes. I'm a machine. But they're wrong. My marriage is not a facade. It's real. It's the only real thing I have. It's not that I love my wife and my children. Love, like any emotion, is ultimately empty, easy to fake, meaningless. But my family is an extension of me. New limbs I've grown, like a salamander. New heads, like Hydra. If you hurt them, you hurt me. If you hurt me, I will hurt you. He's a slight man, narrow shoulders, thinning blonde hair, almost bald on top, wearing small round glasses with thick lenses. He's half my height, even in the Western boots with 3-inch heels. He walks with a strange gait, as if he is skipping. There's something jaunty about him. I follow him into the office building, staying far behind him since he knows me by sight. When he waves the key card to enter his office, I step up behind him and put the silenced gun barrel into the small of his back. Hello again, I say. You... His eyes go wide behind the small glasses when I dig the barrel in a little harder. How did you... Let's go! Inside, it's a small office, but with a nice view of the skyline, well appointed with a large desk, an oversized leather executive chair, and 2 computer monitors on a credenza facing the windows. There's a fine layer of dust on the seat cushions of the 2 visitor chairs in front of the desk. No one comes to visit. So, I say, we meet again. You asked how I knew. Well, I remembered the photographer hired by Zarathustra who took the pictures of me with the elderly actress playing the part of Aunt Salome. That photographer was you. When I found out that old lady actress died from natural causes just a week after that photo shoot, but you didn't. 2 and 2 make 4. You're part of Zarathustra. I don't know what you mean. Zarathustra? I assumed you were a flunky, but that you could lead me to the next rung on the ladder to get to my handler. But now that I see this place, clearly you are more than a flunky. I think you're Aunt Salome. Aunt Dash, you're my handler. Sit down. He sits down behind the desk. I keep standing, gun pointed at him. Why did you kill my wife? I didn't. Let me rephrase that. Why did you order the killing of my wife? Please. I didn't. It had all the markers of Zarathustra. In fact, it's the way I would have done it. Wait, I can explain. Will you allow me? He points, index finger over his shoulder, to the computer monitors. I have a message pre-recorded for this specific situation. It's from the leader of Zarathustra. The leader? Yes. May I? I nod. He swivels the office chair, turns his back to me, brings up web page, completely blank, except for a single open field and the text. Enter password, Z9 asterisks. What's the password? I don't know, but I've been told that you do. He lifts the wireless keyboard from the credenza tray, swivels, and slides the keyboard across the wide expanse of the desk. I shift the gun to my left hand, still pointing the barrel at him. Yes, I do know a password that begins with Z9. The thing is, I'm the only one who does. I keep the gun trained on him as I key in the password. As soon as I enter the password, a video starts playing, and there he is, the leader of Zarathustra. My face. Congratulations, says my face in the video. The sacred game is at an end. The festivals of atonement are over. Since you're watching this video, you're ready for the next step. It's time to take out the middleman, kill the messenger. I shift my silenced gun back into my right hand, but I hesitate. Go ahead, my face on the video says. We don't need Aunt Salome anymore. A feather-light pressure on the trigger, a sound like a cough, a puff of smoke from the barrel, and there's a hole in the little man's forehead. His head snaps back, and he slumps over in the office chair. Aunt Salome is dead. The middleman is gone. The messenger has been killed. My face says, now it's just you. Only you. All you. As it always was. You decide, as you always did. Only now you know that it has always been you making the choices. What's your next assignment? Who's your next kill? The screen goes blank. Outside the window, the skyline, the tall buildings full of people, killer ratings. The stealth drone hovered over the backyard of the suburban house, its camera zooming in close to its subject. A boy, kneeling on the lawn, in one hand a praying mantis, the other a pair of tweezers. Holding the insect close to his expressionless face, he slowly ripped the legs off the mantis. Then once that task was completed, immersed the body in a jar of water that lay on the grass in front of him until the insect stopped struggling and was still. A thin smile played across the boy's face. "Hey, Dave," Richie called out across the bustling studio of Hitchcock Media Enterprises. "Come take a look at this. Think we have a future winner here." Dave looked up from his editing station and walked over to the Richie's terminal, where the balding heavyset man was reviewing the drone footage. "Check this." Richie clicked the play button. I reckon we got ourselves a classic Type C. Dave watched the replay and nodded. Yep, definitely Type C. He will be moving on to small animals next, I bet. Dave grabbed a chair and sat down. What backstory have you got on him so far? Richie pulled up a file onto the terminal screen. Let's see, we got a 14-year-old kid, only child, with single-parent mother. Never knew his father. He scrolled down. Mother is a Christian fundamentalist, breastfed the kid until he was 2 years old. Narrowed his eyes. Oh, and get this. She would hop into the bath with him every night and sponge him clean up until he was 10 when he started getting erections. Dave barked a short laugh. Jesus, where do these people come from? He leant back in the chair. In the future, people would look back on this time as the era of surveillance, where nothing could be hidden unless you were the rich elite. Still, it made their job a hell of a lot easier, which was to make a shitload of money off human misery. Dave liked to think they were performing a necessary evil, like a safety valve on the pressure cooker that was modern society. That made what he did a little easier, and although he still might not sleep well at night, he did sleep in a large mansion in a secure community next to a cosmetically perfect wife. Richie was talking again. Dave focused his attention on the screen. I've run the algorithms, and the AI is coming up with a 93% chance of activation by the age of 25. Those are good odds, said Dave, rubbing his chin. Put a flag on his file, and we'll check back in a few years. Dave stood up and clapped the other man on the shoulder. The fans are gonna love this one. Richie, good job as always. Richie grinned. Thanks, Chief. Dave returned to his desk, where he was currently editing the latest true crime documentary, to be released later that month. This one was a typical Type B case, a nurse who had been stealthily killing cancer patients by injecting air into their IV drips. A pretty mundane, angel of death scenario, but HME had gotten onto her pretty quick, so the broadcasting and publishing rights hadn't cost an arm and a leg. Dave didn't think ratings would be that great, but they had managed to get some decent footage from the hospital and the journal the nurse had written, so it would be worth syndicating to make a bit more profit. HME's documentaries were some of the highest rating reality shows on Downstream, and let's face it, that's all that existed on mass social media these days. But things had been a little lean of late, and they needed a big, high-profile case. Dave considered Richie's latest find. Type C cases were always male, of low to average intelligence, with suppressed trauma from childhood caused by a family member, and would exhibit acts of violence around the onset of adolescence. The victims were usually female and involved sexual violence or torture before death. We need another Ted Bundy or Richard Ramirez, Dave thought. They don't make them like they used to. Dave chuckled. Imagine if we could have got those guys to sign. We would be drowning in royalties. Still shaking his head in amusement, he wandered over to the publicity department. A tall, angular-looking woman, poring over some glossy printouts at her desk, looked up at his approach. Hey, Dave, how can I help you? Hey, Jenny, just wondering if Anthony is around. Jenny pursed her lips. He was on sick leave, I think. She checked the screen in front of her. He was supposed to be back a few days ago, but I haven't seen him. Maybe he needed some more time off. Okay, I guess it's hard to find good help these days, eh? Jenny laughed politely. Dave leaned against the desk. Look, maybe you can help me. I'm trying to come up with a catchphrase for the latest doco, but I'm stumped. Jenny furrowed her brow in concentration. That's the nurse one, right? Dave nodded. And she was an elderly type as well. Her eyes lit up, and she clicked her fingers. How about the Matron of Mercy? Dave contemplated the idea. You know, that's great. He gave Jenny a thumbs up. It'll play well, considering all the victims were terminal patients anyway. Make for some nice, wholesome family viewing. Jenny gave an absent-minded smile as she returned to her work. Dave was just finishing off the credits for the nurse documentary when one of the interns came rushing over, flustered and red-faced. Sir, I think we have something big, the young man said breathlessly. Maybe even a possible Type A. Dave pointed. Juan, isn't it? He prided himself on knowing all the names of his staff, even down to the gophers. Look, calm down. Take a seat and tell me what you've got. The intern sat down and held out a tablet. We just received some info from one of our talent scouts out in San Francisco. Female, body count of 2, high likelihood of Type A. Dave glanced at the picture. Pretty blonde, with freckles and all, a real girl-next-door beauty. He felt a thrill of exhilaration run through him. A Type A was the rarest of the rare, a serial murderer who was charismatic, highly intelligent, and usually politically or ideologically motivated. They were also the most difficult ones to get to sign on the dotted line. Okay, I'm gonna need more details here. Juan read from the screen in his hand. Gordon Calloway, the third CEO of the hedge fund Armada Landi, was found strangled to death in his penthouse suite at the Regency in LA 6 days ago. Our surveillance picked up this woman leaving the room soon after the time of death. Then she just seemed to disappear. The young man licked his lips. Then 2 days ago, a male body was found in a 4th-floor room of the Fairmont in San Francisco. His skin had been totally removed by a surgical device, most likely a scalpel. As a result, the deceased is yet to be identified. He paused and looked at Dave. The same woman was again detected by our surveillance leaving the scene. Dave raised his eyebrows. 2 different methods of killing. Now that was unusual, even for a Type A. This was getting better and better. Now, you are going to love this. The intern smiled. We have ID on the suspect. Her name is Samantha Bronte, 21 years old and currently studying a master's degree in criminology and comp science at New York University. Dave opened his mouth to speak, but Juan held up his hand. And this is the clincher. Her parents were the last victims of one Simon Peters. Dave felt his jaw drop. Simon Peters, aka the Cuckold Strangler. His doco from 4 years ago was one of the highest rating of all time. Jesus Christ, this is insane. Hey, Richie, he yelled out. Get over here pronto. What is it? Richie asked, eyes gleaming. He could tell when something good was going on. Simon Peters, give us a recap. Okay. So his MO was prowling the motor inns of West Florida, where he would stalk and choose his victims, always middle-class couples. Richie scratched his cheek thoughtfully. He would break into their room early in the morning, tie the couple up at gunpoint, rape and strangle the woman in front of her partner, then slit the guy's throat with a hunting knife. He did us a big favor as well by recording the last 2 murders with his phone. Richie looked down at his hands. Of course, we couldn't use such explicit footage for our feature, but somehow, he winked at Dave. Somehow the footage made its way to the dark web, and the notoriety of that boosted our ratings tenfold. Dave let out a breath. There must be some connection here, but that's not important right now. We need to track this Samantha down, and fast. Dave and Richie exchanged knowing looks. This is big, Dave said. Possibly the biggest thing we've ever seen. A notification pinged on Juan's tablet, and he gasped out loud. What is it? Dave queried sharply. The intern looked up. We have just detected the suspect arriving at North Vegas Airport, and from her credit card records, she has booked a room at the MGM Grande for tonight. Dave felt the hairs on his arms stand up. All right, I'm going to take care of this one personally. We can't afford to lose this. Gonna pack an overnight bag and take our private Gulfstream to Vegas ASAP. Should be there in under 2 hours. He pointed at Richie. Organize a car for me and alert everyone that it's all hands on deck. Richie nodded briskly. Will do. And good luck, Dave. Dave arrived at the MGM in the early evening, the desert sunset casting an eerie blood-like haze across the dusty parking lot. The hotel lobby was relatively quiet, a few tourist groups checking in, and a scattering of people at the bar. He looked down at the picture on his phone and scanned the area. Nope, not here. Dave fought down a wave of frustration. Okay, gotta stay calm. He glanced at the bar. I'll grab a drink and wait. He ordered a beer, and the gorgeous raven-haired woman next to him gave him a tentative smile. He nodded briskly. Any other time I'd be interested, but it's all business right now, sweetie. He took his drink and sat down at a table, which commanded a view of the lobby entrance and the elevators leading to the suites. This was the crucial moment, the first contact. He found most of the time the killer was flattered, both by the money offered and the chance at infamous immortality. Their name remembered long after the victims had been forgotten, most of the time. His phone started ringing. Hello? It was Richie. Dave, we got a problem. We've checked the hotel camera and there is no sign of our target, coming or going. Looks like we got scammed. Dave sighed bitterly. Damn it, well, she must be in Vegas somewhere. He looked out the entrance. It was dark now, with the first stars appearing in the velvet night. Look, I'm gonna stay here for a while. Keep your eyes and ears open, and let me know if anything develops. Roger that, Richie replied. Dave sighed again. Might as well get another beer. The dark-haired lady was still at the bar, a few whiskeys in by the looks of the glasses in front of her. She looked at him from under lowered eyelids. I was watching you. Looks like you've been stood up. Dave flashed a wry grin. Yeah, you could say that. A faint smile. Me too. I don't think my date is turning up. She gave him a sultry glance. Look, I have a room here and a bottle of sparkling on ice waiting for me. Want to come up and have a nightcap? Dave chuckled. Still got it. Sure, why not? Maybe we can salvage something out of this shitty situation. Her room was on the 12th floor with an impressive view of the Strip. As she was closing the door behind them, Dave asked, Hey, I didn't catch your name? Oh, how rude of me. It's Samantha. She replied breathily, just as he felt a sharp pinprick, and then everything went black. He awoke groggily, unable to move. After a quick assessment, he realized that was because his hands and feet were restrained with zip ties, and he was lying on a bed with duct tape holding him down. Awake now, my little Dave? The woman was standing beside the bed, gently caressing his arm. He shivered with a frisson of fear. You're Samantha Bronte? He demanded with wide eyes. And how do you know my name? Samantha smiled sardonically. Oh, I know everything about you. She sat down on the edge of the bed. You fell into my trap like such a good little boy. But how? Dave stammered. You'd be surprised at what you can do with a degree in computer science. She continued stroking him with her fingernails. Especially when you have HME's login details from a loyal employee. She took something from the bedside table, and plopped it onto his chest with a sickening squelch. I don't think your buddy Anthony is going to be coming back to work anytime soon. He gazed at the reddish-colored object with growing horror. Holy shit, it was his skin. It was Anthony's skin. Samantha dug her nails into his arm viciously. Dave cried out in pain. Do you know what it's like to lose your parents in the most hideous way, and then to have their violation watched again and again by your millions of depraved fans? Dave gasped. Look, honey, we don't make these killers. We just make them famous. If not us, then someone else would. I'm not so sure. Samantha's voice dripped pure venom. But you're going to find out, all of you, what a really dedicated serial killer can do. She took something from under the bed. You and your puerile nicknames. It's only poetic justice to return the favor. Do you recall one of your first documentaries? Samantha stood up. I believe it was called The Boston Bludgeoner. The rusty sledgehammer was the last thing Dave saw. Mother Nature. The story of a serial killer. I don't think fuck, or any other derivative of that monumental word, should be changed to duck when I finger bang my passion into a text. If I ask a man to come over, we're not going to duck anything. South. Also, do you know that ducks take part in forced copulation? Biologists and other smartass types say that ducks waddle in a line because it makes them less susceptible to predators. They say the waddle also helps them forage for food. But I think they do it because back at the duck pond, the male ducks waddle their way into organized gang rapes of the female ducks. And ducks kill ducklings. All sorts of shameful criminal acts happen at the duck pond. Yet, some people don't want to eat ducks because of that cute waddling line. A duck is a lucky fuck that way, at least until it gets raped by other ducks, murdered by its parents, or a human who fails to find the charm in waddling decides to eat it. Predator. Prey. Another day. My cat loathes ducks, yet their rampages entertain her. We live in a gated community because I inherited a house here. This community created ponds throughout the neighborhood, filling them with ducks and, even worse, swans that patrol the streets like winged lunatics. Everywhere I look, there's a monster that wants to kill me. This cat I took in, she struggled to rip off my face seconds after we met. Then I fed her, scratched her ears, cleaned her wounds, and slayed the fleas that tormented her. Put a heat lamp on the screened-in porch so she can watch the ducks and swans brutalize each other. She helps me too, in ways that challenge basic concepts regarding help. By the way, it's good to meet challenges head-on, but not head-first. My last hookup learned that the hard way, so avoid following self-help ideas about how you control every challenge that crosses your path. You control as much as some other entity lets you. Let me tell you how I got this cat. As I mentioned, she wanted to kill me. It began with her clawing my face, which led to the discovery of a dead man's hand. Star, don't let anyone tell you that crashing into a wall to avoid hitting a cliché in an alley equates to doing the right thing. It equates to pain, especially if the four-legged fucker waits to attack you after you exit the car. The cat I took in waited for me to get the car door open, then let me know who owned the alley. The pain of others engages the masses. They heard the surrender of steel, followed by shrieking. So they scurried across the alley from business back doors like rats scurrying across a dumpster. Several videoed me as I pulled each claw from my face and struggled to dodge fangs. As I fell to the ground, I saw one man rummaging through my glove compartment. The cat finally let go with a low growl and then ran under the car. That's when I noticed the hand hanging over the low wall of a parking garage. I wasn't the only one who noticed. "Oh my God, there's a hand over there!" someone shouted. I darted across the pavement on my hands and knees to avoid feet intent on trampling. My skin ripped and burned. I panted as the pain from the crash and the crawl began to clash. The click of heels against the ground offered a moment's reprieve from the sensation of being ripped apart. Curiosity commands the ability to subjugate fear. Victims learn this firsthand. Without this act, no one moves on. I peeled my face off the ground. A woman in black leather pants and a tight white tank loomed over me, accessories dripping off her like groupies made of gemstones. She looked like Tom of Finland drew her if he had been into women. "Your clothing is so beige, no one else can tell where your blouse ends and your trousers begin. But I see you," she said. "You're like those dangerous creatures that blend in with the leaves." "Lady, I just crashed my car. I just shredded my hands and knees to avoid being trampled. Unless you're here to help, fuck off back to your dungeon." I said, "I see you. I didn't say anything about helping you." "Well, not in the usual way." I turned back to the car, and she loomed in front of me again, though I never saw her move. "I have more to say. You and that cat both play a vital role in the call. My call. You need to help each other, which helps me. You two are going to come to a mutual understanding somehow, some way." "We sure are," the cat said. And that is when I fainted. Star. When I regained consciousness, news stations were filming the parking garage, the alleyway, and the soulless man who boasted to me that he lasted longer than other men, something he learned at an orgy for retirees. I went back to spend time with him because he was my first kill. I wanted more memories with him, like a mother saying goodbye to her child at college if the mother thrives on blood and guts. But all I saw was his hand, the one that struggled to get the knife away from me after the coke-fueled fucking and drug-laced wine. Someone had moved his body from where I left it, but I recognized the ring that signified his happy marriage to a wife who understood his needs. I longed to roll in his innards again, but it wasn't meant to be. The leather-clad woman told the EMTs to let me go. "It's like she was never here," she said, cradling the cat. "She knows nothing about a hand or any job related to it." The EMTs smiled. I felt like a kitten, but at least I was not a duck waddling into a bad group hug. Not yet. Star, a cat's methods for slaughter command merit. She's one of many masters created to maintain balance. "At least I didn't ask a rhino to handle your tutelage," Mother Nature said, as she stretched her stiletto boots across my table. "That's a one-time lesson, and quite an ugly one. You arranged the crash. You made choices that led to this moment. The cull relies on your choice and my preference. The cull demands my attention around the clock. That same attention consumes you, yet you lack any real skill at killing. You're uninformed about death, how to cause it, or navigate it with a professional standard. You left the body in a place where a homeless man sleeps, so he moved it. You have no real control. None of you do. You make choices while lacking control. That amuses me. Like arms grasping for God through the foam of a typhoon amuses me. Well, at least we do something right. I want you to live for an extended period of time, but you need more skill when you kill. You choose to kill. Fine, that helps me. But give me something to look forward to besides banality. You gush over your achievement, but last night in this city alone, 15 people killed a person they met online for sex. All obvious, sloppy efforts. Enough. The cat can give you some skill and flair. I mean, really, you two work well together. That alley battle was tremendous. Otherwise, look forward to death row. The cat can return to the alley. What's an extended period of time? You can't live forever, so until the cat dies. Keep in mind, that stuff about 9 lives amuses me too. Meow. Sabrina sat with one leg in the air, licking her ass. Master indeed. Yet masters die too. What will happen after I die? Maybe I wanted the dead to reach out through the veil and tell me. After all, I wanted to solve a big mystery for them in a way that impressed Mother Nature more than a typhoon drowning. I'm the one left salivating for knowledge in the dark, not them. Sabrina ceased licking and rubbed against my feet. We agreed to live together as predator and prey, though we both recognized the real predator in the room. Sabrina likes me to trap men like she traps mice, so she gave me a whole lesson on how to seduce prey with my walk. You mesmerize them with slink, she said, purring. Let them feel your kink vibration. Stop texting about ducks. Stop waddling like a duck before I actually place you in the pond with that second man. Mother Nature giving you a voice is the worst thing she's ever done. Where are the tuna treats? I want the whole bag this time. We each depend on the other to create balance for her and for you.